It's Myja, and I am so excited to be chatting with Miss Crystal Currie here today, who is a licensed therapist and emotional wellness specialist. Hello, Miss Crystal.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so I am super excited to just jump right in and chat all about your journey and kind of how you made it to where you are and what you're passionate about and all those good things. So we're just gonna hop right into it. So let's learn. I'd love to learn a little bit about your story. So let's talk about kind of what sparked your interest in that mental health space, that emotional wellness space. What happened there? What sparked your interest?
Yeah, so my journey has been very interesting. It's very personal. I've always been a helper just by nature. And so I knew I always wanted to help people. But I grew up in a very toxic home environment, right? My dad wasn't there. Well, first, my mom and my dad had me when they were 14 and 15, right? So I grew up with them. But my dad really wasn't around because my mom kind of used him as like a pawn, me as like a pawn, you know? So it's like, if you won't do right, then you won't see your daughter. It was just kind of that like back and forth, you know? But because my mom was so young when she had me, she was pretty much emotionally immature, you know. So I did not get a lot of those emotional needs met. And she made a lot of, difficult romantic relationship choices that kind of really backfired. And so that created a lot of traumatic experiences for me. And so I always knew that we didn't have the best relationship. But when I became an adult, our relationship just pretty much went to smithereens, right? And I was faced with the fact that I did not have a very healthy relationship with my mom, right? And so I was trying to find places and people to talk to about my situation. And in the Black community, I found out in that moment that you can talk about dads, right? And how they are absent and how they don't do right, but don't you dare talk about a Black mom ever. Like they are protected, you know? And so I felt very shunned and like I did not have a safe space to talk about my experience. And so I became a therapist and I vowed that I would create safe spaces for people for whatever issues that they were dealing with. But 95% of the people that I work with are adults who have unhealthy relationships with their parents, and they're very toxic, and they've had some childhood experiences that they've carried into their adulthood that they need to heal from. And so that is how I came into the profession and how I kind of created my own niche, because there are people who fathers weren't there, but they were also left with toxic mothers, and that they need a place like I did to heal and discuss that without judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that, kind of using your own experience to help others who may be dealing with sort of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so right about, don't you dare talk about Black mamas.
Ever.
But, right. But I think I'm not a mental health expert, but I think that is there's something to be said about that. When we think of the Black community and addressing that there may not be healthy relationships with our moms, like, don't get me wrong, I'm here for Black women all day, every day. But we do have to address kind of that elephant in the room. So it's so important that you said that. And you mentioned, you work with a lot of people who have, trauma, unhealthy relationships, maybe with their parents or just with family members. And with that, you've worked in a myriad of therapeutic settings. I was reading through your bio and I saw that you worked in a substance abuse center, a sex offender center, a juvenile detention center. Tell me about those experiences. What is that? First of all, how did you get there? Tell me, how did you get there? And then tell me about some of those experiences.
Yeah, as human beings, we always gravitate to what's familiar, right? So dealing with people in those type of environments, like the juvenile detention centers and the psychiatric centers and all of those, like I'm not unfamiliar to that and the chaos that it brings. So actually I was comfortable there, and I still am. So my first job out of college was a juvenile detention center, and I did that for 4 years and I loved it. And then I went to the sex offender program and the substance abuse program and the psychiatric center. And then I worked with families whose children were about to be removed by DSS, and through that, I was really able to see how generational trauma is passed down, right? Because you have 8-year-olds who are dealing with very adult issues, and then you work with their parents because children live in a vacuum. They, you can heal them, but once they go back into the environment, the same thing happens. And so you work with the parents, and then you realize that the children are the way they are because the parents are the way that they are. And it's not enough for us as adults to just, decide we don't want to deal with it, because I realized even as me being a parent, that I can't parent past my own healthiness and self-awareness, right? And all of those things were passed down in all of the environments that I worked in. So when I became a mental health professional, I really focused on adults because of a lot of the adults that I work with are parents or they desire to be parents. And so just like you can pass generational wealth to your kids, you can pass generational healing or generational dysfunction. It is completely up to us. And we have a lot of blind spots that we're not aware of. And so it's really important for me to work with the adults so that we can get all of that situated so they don't pass it down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so important. So you work with adults and children, or is there like a majority kind of target audience that you work with, or?
Yeah, so I really just work with adults, but it's very interesting because they are adults who are wounded and have wounded inner child. So it's essentially dealing with a child who's in an adult body that is attempting to recreate relationships from their childhood to get some unmet needs met. So yeah, so it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what would you say is sort of your specialty, right? So you've talked about kind of that childhood trauma, those unhealthy family relationships, those adults who are trying to recreate that life that they didn't have. So what would you say is your specialty, and what kind of drew you to that? Would you say I know you mentioned it kind of just being familiar, like it just felt right. So what would you say is your specialty, and what kind of drew you to that?
Yeah, so my specialty is adults who have unresolved traumatic experiences that derive from unhealthy relationships from their parents, right? So it is adults who have been in relationships with their parents, and the relationship itself has been traumatic, whether the parent was emotionally neglectful, physical abuse, because in the Black community, we don't recognize a lot that we were physically abused. And I have a lot of people that I work with where I have to say, no, that was abuse, And so they're dealing with that. And those who just did not feel like they were picked by their parents or that they were good enough for their parents, because a lot of us in the Black community are overachievers for many reasons, right? But a lot of us are overachievers because we realized, and it was reinforced, that who we are authentically is not enough. So we have to obtain and achieve so many things in order to become valuable. And that is where our identity is attached to, until you get to this point where it's like, okay, I don't like any of this and I don't know who I am. And that's really what draws people to therapy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I started my therapy journey this year.
Oh, good.
And yes, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. And when I first kind of jumped into, some of my issues or the things that, I wanted to discuss, we jumped right into my childhood. What is your relationship like with your parents? What are some things you experienced? And so you kind of talked about sometimes we don't know that, we've been traumatized by abuse or something like that because we didn't know it was abuse, right? So it's so important, that you mentioned that, especially in the Black community. It's now you're carrying this generational trauma that you didn't even know was generational trauma. You didn't even know it was abuse. What would you say is, or should I say, are some of the challenges or the issues that you kind of deal with in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so it's really hard for me because I'm still a person, right? I'm a therapist, but I'm still a person, you know. It's really difficult, even in my profession, to see people who are just suffering, suffering for things that were not their fault. Because I've been there and I connect with that, you know. And when you have these traumatic experiences or these mental health symptoms that come from your parents and what they did not do, and you're kind of left with this mess to figure out, and it was never really yours to figure out in the first place, and it's like, gosh, why am I suffering? Like, why did this happen to me? Like, that has always been difficult for me because I resonate with that so much. So even as a therapist, I still struggle with that when people are just like in that initial phase when they're just like, I just don't understand why I'm suffering. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, we always say, the therapist has to have a therapist too, right? Like therapists need therapy. So when we think of, self-care and prioritizing yourself and not getting caught up in those stories because you can relate, what does that look like for you? What does self-care look like for you? How do you separate, kind of that work from personal, even though work is kind of personal?
So yeah, I do have a therapist. I have a therapist that I see. She is absolutely amazing. I'm pretty sure everybody thinks that about their therapist, but my therapist is absolutely amazing. And then I have people in my life who are safe for me, where I can be exactly who I am. If I am in shambles, if I need encouragement, if I just need some reinforcement, like I can go to them and they know exactly what I need. And they've done life with me. Like I've been walking with them for like 10 years. And so they know, like, if I'm distant or they haven't heard from me in a while, they'll check up, hey, what's going on? You need to come, you need me to come, and I have those people in my life. And then I have my husband who's absolutely amazing. And my kids, and they don't care about this therapy stuff. They just want me, and that keeps me grounded. And so I really appreciate all the people who are strategically placed in my life because it does take a team, I say, to make me go and to keep me healthy and sane. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. Go, hubby. All right now. So I know that July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a couple of questions around that. My best friend, she's in the whole therapy, to get a degree in therapy and stuff like that. So sometimes she's my best friend. I'm like, okay, I need you to be my therapist today. But one thing that we discussed, I think, when I think of minorities or when I think of Black people, the Black community, and when it comes to therapy. So once you kind of get into that place where you're like, okay, I want to go to therapy. I want to try this out. I found this therapist. Now I don't know what to expect. So you go into therapy and you're like, what do I do? What do I say? Should I tell her about the argument that I had with my boyfriend yesterday? Should I tell her that I didn't eat? Like, you don't know what to expect, or you kind of don't know what to do kind of going into therapy.
Yeah.
So how do you learn about that? How do you, I guess, prepare? What is the how-to for therapy when you have, the Black community and my parents? There was no such thing as mental health in my family.
Absolutely.
Love my mom and daddy to death,
Right.
but that ain't nothing wrong with you. You don't pay no bills. Okay, I pay all the bills.
Right. What you got to worry about? What you sad about?
Ain't nothing wrong with you. The only thing you need to worry about is getting A's on your report card.
Right.
And so now that, I'm in this place where, okay, I've grown, I'm trying out therapy. And for people who are like me and we're going into therapy, it's like, how the heck do you do this?
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people? What is that kind of research or preparation going into therapy when you've never done it before?
Yeah, I identify that with that too, because I feel like there's a certain level of anxiety when you try to find a therapist anyway, right? And my first therapist, like after the second session, she didn't show up anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh. But that's like the worst fear, it's like, what if I am too much, So I would always say, like, do your research, like ask people, if somebody's going to therapy, like ask them about their therapist or if their therapist can recommend a therapist, And then I always say it's so cool to get a therapist that looks like you. that you can identify with, that you don't have to feel like you have to modify what you say or watch what you say, because therapy is your safe place, And so if you want to cuss, if you want to yell, if you want to use your jargon, if you want to come with your hair conditioned or wrapped, do that, because ultimately you pay the therapist. Like, the therapist works for you, And so once you've done all that and you find a therapist, be honest with your therapist, and be like, do you want a therapist that comes planned with things to do? Or do you want a therapist that you're able to come and say, well, this is what I want to talk about today. This is what bothers me today. Because I always tell the clients that I'm working with, yeah, I know what you want to work with, but life still happens while you're trying to heal. So if life is lifing, let's talk about life, and then we can get back to the rest of it. Because I think it's really important that you keep in communication with your therapist, because we're not mind readers. We're very good at the brain and how it functions, but we can't read your mind. So if we're doing something also that you don't like or that you enjoy that's not working for you, let us know, because it may be something that we're not capable of doing and we need to refer you to someone else, or we just need to change our approach. But being honest and open with your therapist is always beneficial.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to ask, what is some advice that you have for, I guess, finding a therapist, right? So we talked about kind of talking to some of your friends, maybe about their personal therapy experience, always looking for somebody who looks like you so that you can come to therapy with your bonnet on and not feel judged. But I will say, I think from my personal experience, when I started therapy, this was my first time. I didn't know what to expect, and I actually switched my first therapist because we weren't connecting. But when you think of people who already have anxiety about going into therapy, right? This is a scary new environment, and then I don't care for my first therapist. Most people are like, this isn't for me,
right?
This isn't for me. So so I guess my question is, what are some ways to, I guess, make that checklist for what you want your therapist to be? And then if it doesn't work out, how do you move forward from that?
Yeah. So I would say for a checklist, like, think about what you would want if you could take your really good friend that you can talk to about anything and turn them into a therapist. Like, what would that look like for you? Physically, what would you need to hear? How would they need to act? Like that kind of thing. But then there are some great databases. I know, like Therapy for Black Girls on Instagram, they have an amazing database. Psychology Today has a great database. There are also databases where you can just Google and you can find a video of a therapist talking about themselves. And there are a lot of therapists who have personal pages now, because we're going into the age where therapists aren't just therapists, but they allow you into their personal life as well. And so you get an opportunity to see what the therapist is like personally, because that was important to me, that she had the same values and beliefs that I did. And so Instagram is a great tool if you use like the hashtags and, find a therapist in your area, because I don't think people realize that because of COVID, you can now see a therapist virtually anywhere in your state, so they don't have to be exactly where you live. They can just be in your state, or you can find a therapist that's outside of your state, but is licensed to operate in your state. Yeah.
All good points. Now, when we going back to Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, why is it important for, I know it's minority, but I'm gonna say Black people. Why is it important? Why is it important for Black people to seek mental health treatment? Why is that important for us?
Yeah, because our life is hard, like just being blanket, our life is really, really hard. And we have so many struggles, and so many obstacles that are forced on us, and then that we force on ourselves, that we really just need a safe place, to be, where you don't have to be a mom, an employee, a business person, a sister, a wife, a husband. You don't have to be any of that, but the focus for an hour is completely on you and whatever you want to talk about, and then we have so much that we feel like we have to keep inside, and these standards that we have to uphold, and the pressure is so much that we're going to literally bust if we don't. There are so many Black women and Black men who are leaving their families, leaving what they've known because they're just tired. Life wears you down and you just get tired, and you just need a place where you can just be you and become, filled. Because, I heard a great quote, and it's like, we talk about you can't pour from an empty cup, but whatever's in the cup belongs to you, and the overflow is for everybody else. But sometimes we just try to pour from the cup that's really supposed to be ours. And then we're wondering like, well, why is nobody tending to my needs, or why don't I have what I need, And so it's so important just to give yourself that opportunity to reflect and to let out and just be who you need to be and say what you need to say without judgment, and nobody else will know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good points. Good points. There's something that you said that triggered something that I wanted to ask you. So for someone who is thinking about therapy, they're right on the edge, but they're scared, right? That anxiety kicks in, that fear kicks in, and it's like, maybe this isn't for me. What advice do you have for that person?
Yeah. So anxiety is very interesting because it's absolutely necessary, but anxiety is designed to keep you safe, right? And so although we know that we need to get better, the way that our brain works is it enjoys what is familiar, even though it's unhealthy, And so I would definitely tell you to experience the feelings of anxiety, but push through them anyway, and just go to therapy, make the appointment, and see what happens. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? And you need to go to therapy, and that's why you're having the internal struggle. And the internal struggle is never going to go away, right? It's just going to come out in different parts of your life. So just go ahead and do it. And then once you do it, and once you get your feet wet, you'll be like, I should have went to therapy a long time ago. That's usually what happens.
I love it. So just go ahead and kind of just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah.
And go from there. Miss Crystal, what keeps you going?
Oh my gosh. I am really excited about people being healed. I have been on the other side of being unhealed and not knowing like if my reaction or responses to things was because of what was happening in the moment or what I pulled back from years ago, And I've been there, and I've been to a place where I couldn't understand why I was suffering and why I was self-sabotaging and going through all of these cycles, and nothing was seemed to working. And I felt like I had to be in control, but I was never really in control. Like I've been there, and now I'm on the other side, and it feels good over here. Listen, it feels good over here. And to have the opportunity to help people to get to the other side, that is so exciting for me because I understand the power of healing and the fact that I'm healed. So my kids have an opportunity to live a life where they don't have to go to counseling because of me. That excites me too. And the fact that I get to have a healthy relationship with my husband and a long-lasting marriage, that excites me too. So that is literally what keeps me going, what wakes me up every day, and what keeps me going through the sessions and the sessions and the sessions. I'm just excited about that.
Child, you about to make me shout up in here. I can't wait
to the organ.
That, okay. I'm still a work in progress. I can't wait to get to the other side, okay? Because that it sounds like it's beautiful over there.
It's wonderful over here. And you become unapologetic about who you are and what you want. And you just don't settle anymore, And it's just authentic. And it feels good, Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so beautiful that you mentioned that, right? Just like making it to the other side and then seeing other people like having that impact, right? That helps other people get to the other side. But sometimes, even thinking about the journey and those small kind of celebrations along the way, those small, like, sometimes I'll be on the phone with my best friend and I'm like, such and such pissed me off today, but you know what? I'm working on grace. So I didn't say such and such and such, or instead of me saying this, I went and I said this instead. And I tried to get a little bit more understanding, and I understood where she was coming from. And now we good. I'm like, what? I'm proud of myself, just on that journey. So I think for me personally, that feels good. Those small kind of accomplishments along the way. Like I said, honey, Jesus and my therapist are still working on me. But, you know, those small accomplishments along the way feel amazing. So I can only imagine, you know, what it feels like to truly feel like you've made it to the other side. And there's always, you know, room for improvement, right? You're always on this continuous learning journey. But that moment where you really feel like, wow, I am healed, right? Like I have healed from this thing. Like I have healthy relationships. I know how to communicate. You can't provoke me.
Listen, I am unoffendable. You know, like, I'm good.
I know. So, Miss Crystal, tell us what's next for you. What would you say is next for you?
Yeah, well, I just released a workbook on forgiveness because that has been what my healing journey has been.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I wrote a workbook on forgiveness because I had to overcome a lot of things, but I was only able to overcome when I forgave. And I had to forgive without an apology or an explanation, you know, because I was stuck there. You know, they had moved on. They were on with, you know, going on with their life. But here I was waiting, upset. Because listen, I could hold a grudge with two hands. You know, it was no problem, right? No problem. And so, you know, people would always say, you know, you just need to forgive and move on. You need to forgive and move on, like it's a simple thing, you know, and I am a realist. When I do therapy, I'm real, you know, and forgiveness is not easy, you know, and it takes a lot of work. And so I pretty much put my journey into a workbook, and it's a step-by-step guide on what you can do in order to forgive when it comes to, you know, your triggers and adjusting your expectations, because oftentimes we put expectations on people that they never agreed to. And then when they disappoint us, we become upset because they did something that we expected them not to do, even though they never agreed that they would not do it, you know, but that's in the book. And so I did that. And so that's pretty amazing. And today is National Forgiveness Day. So that's exciting too. Yeah. And so then in October, I am doing my Healing the Inner Child retreats in Eastern North Carolina, where me and a small group of people go and we heal the emotional wounds that were created during childhood. And it is absolutely amazing and life-changing. And that is what I have coming up. Yeah.
I love it. I was getting ready to talk and I was still on mute. I love that. That sounds life-changing. What you said, it's an event? Is it like a day thing or a series?
It's a weekend. It's a weekend, Friday to Sunday. We're in a retreat center in Eastern North Carolina where it's farm to table. You can get massages. You see the mountains. You can see the animals. So therapeutic. And we go, and it's just me, and it's about 7 people, and either we're addressing the issues with your mom or we address the issues with your dad. And for that weekend, it's just me and you, and we are hammering it out, and we are crying, and we are talking about the hidden things, the secret things that you've never wanted to utter ever before in your life. And we deal with those things. And by the end of that weekend, my goal is that you are healed completely and you never have to turn back. And so that is what that weekend is all about. And I'm so excited. It is like the highlight. I wasn't able to do it last year because of COVID, but this year I am doing it and I am excited about it.
Let me tell you, that sounds so amazing. I will be laid out on the floor somewhere. Number 1, I will be laid out, healing, laid out. And 2, I'm not leaving after that. Y'all might be staying for the weekend, but I done moved in. I done packed my bag.
Yes, it is absolutely amazing. And it's mostly Black people that come, and I love it. I love it because we deserve that. We deserve a space to just let it all out and leave it and never have to pick it up again.
Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. So now tell us where we can find your workbook, where we can purchase, and then how we can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, so you can get the workbook at book.crystalcurrie. That's CURRIE.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Crystal R. Currie, CURRIE on Instagram.
Awesome. This was so amazing. So amazing. I love chatting with you. I've learned so much about mental health and Black people and mental health awareness month for minorities. I keep minorities, Black people. I'm gonna work on it.
Listen, it's whatever you want to say.
Okay. Okay. I feel like this is a non-judgmental space, right?
Absolutely. It's a safe space.
Yes, love it. Well, I will be keeping up with you. I'll be following you on Instagram. And for those of you out there who are listening, once we post this video, I hope that you follow Miss Crystal and keep up with her journey and look into the forgiveness workbook, because child, I need to work on that. But yes, Miss Crystal, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much.